What happened last night wasn't just another presidential address. It was a full-scale meltdown broadcast live to millions of Americans, and the aftermath revealed something far more disturbing than anyone expected. Donald Trump delivered what critics are calling the most chaotic speech of his political career. But here's the twist: the moment those cameras stopped rolling, with microphones still recording, the former president revealed the real reason behind this televised disaster. And what he admitted exposes just how fractured, how dysfunctional, and how completely out of control this administration has become. 15 minutes of shouting. 15 minutes of provable lies. 15 minutes that left every American, regardless of political ideology, asking the same question: what was the point? Charts that meant nothing. Graphs with no context. A president screaming at the nation with nothing new to say, visibly angry, visibly bitter, collapsing under the weight of his own failed presidency, but the real story didn't emerge until after the speech ended. When Trump thought the cameras were off, but the microphones were still recording, he admitted why he gave that disastrous address. And the answer reveals everything about how little control he actually has over his own White House. Before we dive into what Trump confessed, let's examine how one of America's most respected political analysts responded to this train wreck in real time. Lawrence O'Donnell didn't mince words, and his breakdown of Trump's lies is essential viewing.
Have you ever in your life encountered a character as wretched as Donald Trump? Donald Trump delivered that character to millions of Americans tonight in a 15-minute shouted speech from the White House. Donald Trump's shouting seems to indicate he has not yet learned how microphones actually work. America's worst public speaker struggled mightily reading a teleprompter full of lies tonight. His speech, if we can call it that, in it, Donald Trump said that when he took office, quote, inflation was the worst in the history of our country. That is a lie, a typical Trump lie. Inflation was at 3% when Donald Trump took office. Inflation is at 3% right now. Donald Trump said that when he took office, we had, quote, transgender for everybody. That would mean that Donald Trump is transgender. That would mean that everybody is transgender. It is, of course, Trumpian madness. We did not have transgender for everybody. Donald Trump said, I was elected in a landslide. That is a lie. Donald Trump won by 1.5% of the vote. Donald Trump said they released violent felons, meaning the Biden administration. No president in history has released more violent felons in one day than Donald Trump did on his inauguration day when he pardoned every violent felon who attacked the Capitol on January 6th for him, to try to overturn a presidential election for him. Donald Trump said that tariffs is, quote, my favorite word. Donald Trump lied when he said we made a lot more money because of tariffs. We didn't make any money because of tariffs. America made no money because of that. The Trump tariffs paid to the United States Treasury have all been paid in the United States by Americans. The federal government has simply taken money away from Americans through the Trump tariffs. Americans have had to take money out of their pockets to pay for the Trump tariffs in this country. This is the first time that Donald Trump made a public reference to tariffs without telling the lie that foreign countries pay his tariffs. And Donald Trump lied about the Democrats, saying Democrats are demanding increases in health insurance costs. Donald Trump delivered his speech in a monotone anger. He seemed to be angry.
Monotone anger. That's the phrase that captures it perfectly. Trump wasn't delivering a presidential address. He was screaming at reality itself, furious that the truth keeps exposing his failures at every turn. Let's be crystal clear about what we just witnessed in that analysis. Every major claim Trump made during that speech was a lie. Not spin. Not exaggeration. Outright fabrication. That he claimed inflation was the worst in the history of our country when he took office. The actual number? 3%. The current inflation rate? Also 3%. No crisis inherited. No miracle recovery. Just lies that he claimed he won in a landslide. The margin? 1.5% of the popular vote, one of the narrowest victories in modern American history. That he accused the Biden administration of releasing violent felons while conveniently forgetting that on his very first day back in office, he pardoned every single person who violently attacked the Capitol on January 6. The largest mass pardon of violent criminals by any president in a single day, and he has the audacity to point fingers elsewhere. And then there's the tariff con. For years, Trump told Americans that foreign countries pay his tariffs. He repeated this lie so often that millions believed it. But the economic reality is devastating. Every single dollar collected through Trump's tariffs has been paid by Americans. Not China. Not Europe. American consumers reaching into their own wallets to fund this failed trade policy. Recent economic update. New analysis released just this week confirms that Trump's tariff policies have cost the average American household an additional $1,200 annually in hidden costs, and that number continues climbing as these policies remain in effect. The federal treasury hasn't collected revenue from foreign nations. It's collected it from American families struggling to afford groceries, gas, and basic necessities. That's the truth Trump was screaming over last night. That's the reality he can't accept. But here's where this story takes its most revealing turn, because that speech almost didn't happen at all. In fact, according to reports that emerged immediately after the address, Trump never wanted to give it in the first place. The decision wasn't his. The timing wasn't his choice. Even the content seemed forced, rushed, delivered with visible resentment. So who actually made the call? Who forced a sitting president to deliver a nationally televised address against his will? The answer exposes the power dynamics inside this White House, and reveals just how little control Trump actually has. According to journalist accounts with microphones still recording after the cameras cut, Trump admitted that his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, made him do it. She demanded this speech. She orchestrated this disaster. And Trump, supposedly the most powerful man in the world, complied like an employee taking orders from management. Why would Susie Wiles force this? Because she's in full damage control mode. Just hours before Trump announced this surprise address, Vanity Fair published a devastating profile of Wiles, an interview so brutally honest, so catastrophically candid, that it sent shockwaves through the entire administration. In that article, Wiles trashed nearly everyone in Trump's inner circle. She called Stephen Miller a little gopher. She exposed J.D. Vance as nothing more than an opportunist. She made Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt look incompetent. She even suggested Trump exhibits behavioral patterns consistent with addiction, describing him as an alcoholic who doesn't drink. Think about that power dynamic. Wiles publicly humiliates the entire administration, admits the president, and yet, on that same day, she retained enough power to force the President of the United States onto national television to perform damage control for her personal PR crisis. Doesn't understand basic government functions, reveals internal chaos, and still commands enough authority to make Trump dance on command. This wasn't leadership. This was a puppet show. And Trump was the puppet. Major networks interrupted primetime programming for this. CBS cut into the live finale of Survivor. Millions of Americans tuned in expecting something significant, perhaps a major policy announcement, maybe even a declaration of war given the ominous build-up on Truth Social. Instead, what they got was a bitter, angry man reading a teleprompter at double speed, visibly furious that he'd been ordered to perform this charade. The confusion everyone felt makes sense now. There was no purpose to that speech. No coherent message. No strategy. Just a desperate chief of staff trying to regain control of a narrative spinning wildly out of her grasp, and a president too weak to refuse. Compare this to actual leadership. When Nancy Pelosi served as Speaker of the House, whether you agreed with her politics or not, one fact was undeniable: she knew her caucus. She knew her numbers. She never walked into a vote unprepared. She communicated with her members daily and maintained ironclad discipline over legislative strategy. That's control. That's leadership. Now look at Mike Johnson. Multiple discharge petitions have succeeded on his watch, a historic embarrassment demonstrating he can't manage his own party. He's losing votes on basic procedural matters. The Epstein files vote. Lost control. The ACA subsidies. Lost control, and Trump. He's reportedly sleeping 12 to 14 hours a day. He didn't even read the Vanity Fair article about his own chief of staff. According to Wiles herself, Trump didn't know what USAID did when he ordered its elimination, one of the most consequential and disgraceful decisions of his presidency, made in complete ignorance. Recent development, just this week, reports emerged that additional House Republicans are considering retirement, further destabilizing the already razor-thin majority. Political analysts now calculate that Speaker Hakeem Jeffries isn't just possible, it's becoming probable, potentially before the midterm elections even arrive. This is a White House that can't govern itself, let alone the country, but the chaos extends even beyond Trump's inner circle. The very foundation that built his presidency is now collapsing from within. The Heritage Foundation, the architects of Project 2025, the blueprint for Trump's entire administrative agenda, is currently imploding. Mass resignations are happening in real time over a controversy that perfectly illustrates why this movement is eating itself alive. Tucker Carlson, who secretly despises Trump but carries water for him anyway, invited Nick Fuentes onto his show. For those unfamiliar, Fuentes is an avowed white supremacist, an anti-Semite, and a bigot who has openly called for authoritarian rule. When Heritage Foundation's president initially tried to defend this appearance under the banner of free speech and letting 1,000 MAGA flowers bloom, the backlash was instantaneous and catastrophic. Staff members resigned en masse. The coalition fractured. Donors pulled funding. And for the first time, MAGA couldn't simply fall in line behind Trump's implied approval, because Trump either didn't know about it, didn't care, or most tellingly, no longer commands the gravitational force he once did within his own movement. This is what happens when a cult of personality loses its personality. For years, the formula was simple: praise Trump, stay loyal to Trump, and you're protected. That was enough. Dear leader's approval was the only currency that mattered in Republican circles. Not anymore. The calculation has fundamentally changed. Republicans are now looking past Trump, not because they've suddenly discovered principles, but because they sense the end approaching. They see the retirement stacking up. They see the midterm projections trending disastrously. They see Mike Johnson's speakership crumbling in real time. They know accountability is coming. And they're scrambling to position themselves for whatever comes next, desperately trying to distance themselves from a sinking ship while claiming they were never really on board in the first place. The people who stormed into power thinking they could break every law, demolish every institution, and reshape government in their authoritarian image, they've failed. Yes, Trump has deeply damaged our democratic systems. Yes, the harm is real and severe. But they failed to achieve their ultimate goal of permanent transformation, and now they're realizing this era is over. The Trump moment has ended. Not in some distant future, right now, in real time, collapsing under the weight of its own incompetence and corruption. That speech last night. It wasn't presidential leadership. It was the final proof that Trump is no longer in command of his own administration, his own party, or his own movement. He's a figurehead. A performer forced onto stage against his will. A man with, as insiders describe it, increasingly less stamina, being paraded in front of cameras to serve someone else's agenda. The takeaway from last night that left so many confused and frustrated finally makes sense. There was no strategy. No purpose. No point. Just Susie Wiles cementing her power by demonstrating that she can still make the President of the United States dance like a trained animal whenever she needs a distraction from her own scandals. That's not governance. That's circus performance. And the American people deserved better than being forced to watch it interrupt their evening. The Trump presidency isn't just struggling. It has collapsed. The coalition is fractured beyond repair. The movement is at war with itself. And the man at the center of it all has been reduced to a puppet reading words he doesn't believe, defending policies he doesn't understand, serving an agenda he didn't choose. This is the Trump collapse. It's not coming, it's here. It's happening. And every single day brings new evidence that this presidency is finished, not in years, but right now. The only remaining question is how much more damage will be inflicted on American democracy before the inevitable conclusion finally arrives. but here's what we know for certain: MAGA is looking toward the future. And what they see is internal warfare, mass resignations, electoral catastrophe, and a leader who has become a liability rather than an asset, and for those of us who value truth, accountability, and actual democratic governance. That's a reason to stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep demanding better. The collapse is real. The chaos is undeniable. And the truth can no longer be shouted down by an angry man with a teleprompter.